So let me do a little bit of my story, and then I'm going to segue into Beecham and his story because they sort of intersect. So I am by trade a marriage family therapist. I've been doing that for about 30 years, but I'm transitioning into what is called Life Between Lives Hypnosis. I learned how to do hypnosis to help with therapy, but how I discovered Life Between Lives Hypnosis was at a group I was doing with Beecham. So I always tell the story, only my little dog could have got me to go that far out of my comfort zone. I don't know if you remember Beecham, but the first time I heard you speak, I grilled you on all these things because I came from a Christian background. And Beecham was just so kind and loving and patient. So I went to him to connect with my little dog who had passed. You can hear, everybody was there. It was a spirit circle, so it means there's more than one person there. Everybody was there for people, and I was there for my dog, and Beecham lets you record it. And you can hear me like this through the whole recording because I was just so distraught, but so comforted to connect with my little animal, my little fur baby, as he calls them, and know that she was alive and well. And she came through before anybody's people even came through. I think she came through even before we arrived.
Yes.
So it was such a healing gift that I did training with Beecham. I started actually doing mediumship practicing on my own. He had me join what's called a development circle for people who are developing their mediumship gifts. Oh, I see someone else who needs to be admitted. And I was just enthralled. And even beyond just connecting in my grief, you start connecting with souls on the other side. And you realize, well, I won't go off into it, but I would have loved to have been a medium, but one, I didn't really have the natural gift. And Beecham will say I did just fine, but anybody can do it if you practice. But I was sort of neglecting my real life, like my actual husband, my very alive husband. And so I had to stop coming. And on the last day, we were sitting around having snacks after a development circle. And Beecham, what's the name of the girl, the younger girl, Diane? Was that her name?
Diane,
yeah.
Yes.
She said, you know, since you do hypnosis as a therapist, you've probably heard of Michael Newton. And I said, no. And Beecham said, oh, you should read his book, Journey of Souls. And a lot of you know Michael Newton's work. And I read his book. I read all his books. I read everything I could find. But basically, sometimes people ask Beecham at his events, what do souls do on the other side? And that's kind of the question Michael Newton answered, which was, he asked someone who was a psychologist doing hypnosis, and he asked someone to go to the source of their loneliness. And some of you know Brian Weiss, and he asked someone to go to the source of their anxiety, and they went to a past life. Brian Weiss is the renowned psychiatrist who does past life all over the United States. Well, Michael Newton asked someone to go to the source of their loneliness, and they didn't go to a past life. They went to the time between lives. So
interesting.
We don't just have a soul mate, we have a soul family that we incarnate with over and over. And in this life, you might be my friend. In my last life, you were my sister. In my next life, you're my husband. We change roles depending on what lesson we want to learn, and we contract for different lessons. Well, she went to her soul family, basically in heaven, what happens in heaven between the last life and this life. She went to her soul family and discovered that no one had incarnated with her in this life. And that was the source of her loneliness. And so he did some 8,000, well, 7,000, but now with those of us who've been trained, 8,000 interviews where people do a past life experience. And then at the end, they say it's like a near-death experience without the death. Under deep hypnosis, you cross over to the other side. And I just did one yesterday. It was 5.5 hours. And you spend the whole session, most of the session on the other side, meeting your soul family, going before your council, finding out what your purpose is for this life, how it fits within all the lives, past lives. Yesterday was some discussion about future lives. You find out that you're a teacher or you're in school. That's real life, and this is where we come to practice and learn our lessons. But that's real life. So when I learned about that, I said, oh my gosh. And I did my sessions, and they said, you need to get trained in this. There's about 200 of us who are trained in the Michael Newton Institute internationally. And they said, you need to get trained, and you need to stop doing therapy, and you need to do this. So I'm still doing therapy. but I'm transitioning to this. So Beecham was what brought me to Michael Newton and to all of you. And so I've been talking about him for years. So now that we're on Zoom, I invited him on and said, so I'm just going to say, besides Beecham being very special and important to me in my personal life, he also works remotely. He works in his home here in Southern California. He's worked internationally. He's trained by Lisa Williams and has a master's from Santa Monica University. And with that, I'm going to have you go ahead and share a little bit with us. Thank you. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Vondie, for having me on here. And thank you to all of you for joining us so that I can share a little bit of my journey from childhood suppression to adult expression, as I call it, because so I'll just share a little bit of that first, and then I will share with you some of how spirit communicates with me. And I use the term spirit collectively for all of the spirit loved ones. Okay, so or I'll call them spirit people, because they are people, we are people. And so we want to be respected as people, we want to be treated as people. And so anyway, and then I'll share with you some of how they communicate with me. And so first of all, I'd like to share a little bit of my experience with the spirit people, which when I was a child, at about 5 years old, is the earliest memory that I have of having these shadowy figures, which I called ghosts, because that's all I knew at that age. And also, I knew something was up, though. Well, I really didn't know something was up, but as soon as I was old enough and able to read, my mother must have been horrified, because the books that I checked out were on ghosts. I wanted all my books that I checked out of the library were on ghosts, bats, spiders, things that go bump in the night. So anyway, so that's an example of my soul knowing that that I'd come in to experience this. I did not know what a medium was at 5 years old. But anyway, so seeing those people in my bedroom was unnerving, to say the least. Was I called them scary, that they were the scary people. And so after a short period of time, I shut down my ability to see them physically with my physical eyes. And so that's the suppression. So I suppressed it because I just didn't understand it. And I had told my sister, who I'm really close with, and she didn't believe me. And my parents said, you've been watching too much Dark Shadows. And I mean, that was later on. And so I just shut it down. And it's easy to do that with defense mechanisms. Vondie knows that as a counselor, as a therapist, a psychologist, that you can shut those down. So that's what happened. So then I did have some experiences, though, in my early adulthood when I was at the university, studying at the University of East Carolina University, and I saw my great-grandfather. I didn't know it was him at the time, but I saw him in a somewhat semi-transparent state, but it was in enough detail that I could see what he was wearing, flannel shirt with overalls, and I could see his image enough to describe him to my mother several years or a couple years later. And she said, well, that's your great-grandfather. And then my mother said, well, you got these abilities. You got this from me. But I really didn't know about that when I was younger, like when I was 5, 6, 7, because she was afraid of it. But that could have also been why she did not want to acknowledge it. Okay. So anyway, with the adult expression, we're moving on to that now. So in college, I saw my great-grandfather. I saw some other people that I did not recognize. And again, they would look somewhat transparent. When I was a child, it was more like shadowy figures. It was, and that could have been because of how afraid I was of them. So anyway, I started my master's in spiritual psychology training at the University of Santa Monica. And in doing so, and that was from 2000 to 2002, we would do these deep emotional clearing and healing exercises to integrate the skills that we're being taught. And so we would get together in what were called trios, where you're the counselor, the neutral observer, and you're the client. And you get to sit in each one of them. It's a very effective way of integrating and utilizing and learning how to use those skills. But here's the thing is, so there were like 300 and some people in my class. So, and they encouraged you to get together with people that you didn't know, to not get together with people, the same people every time. Well, within a short period of time, the buzz was that to get together with me, because I was getting information from people that were dead, that passed over. So when I was the counselor and I was working with the client, with the person that was in the client chair, I would get this information, but they would say, yeah, but she's dead. Well, yeah, but he's dead. And I was like, okay, all right. And at the same time, I was very interested in John Edwards' television show, Crossing Over with John Edward. And some of you may remember that, where he would do gallery readings, where he would connect with spirit, but he also talked about how it worked and how he would know that a spirit was communicating with him. So while I was in my master's in spiritual psychology training, it just lifted the veil, so to speak. Some of those defense mechanisms just were deactivated. So I started having experiences, feeling sensations, and I'll go into more of that when I talk about how they communicate with me, but buzzing up and down my neck. Some of you might have even experienced through a chiropractor when you have electrostim, and when they stimulate the muscle and it feels like that buzzing. So it was like that. So when this first started occurring, I thought it felt like a spider. And even though I did book reports on spiders and was fascinated by spiders, I was also terrified by them. So anyway, to make a long story shorter, that was what I thought was happening. I would like pat the back of my neck because like, what? Get it off of me. What is it? And it would happen again. And so then I was watching Crossing Over with John Edward, and at the end he would entertain questions. And someone asked, well, how do you know when the spirit is wanting to make contact with you? And he says, I get a buzzing up and down my neck. And I thought, oh my gosh, wow. So with that happening in the trios where I knew stuff about people who passed away, and then having this buzzing up and down my neck, it was like, ding, ding, ding. Hello. Something is happening here that I need to explore further. So I sought out some instruction through international medium Francesca Kempton. She was the first English medium that I studied with. And she was the type where get up here and do your thing. And I'm like, okay, it's my first time. But I was able to do so somewhat with her help. And so I just sought out other teachers, Hollister Rand and some other, Patricia Price, and I studied some with James Van Praagh. I took a class in him and Mavis Patilla. So a number of people. And the most recent is Lisa Williams. She had that television show, Life Among the Dead, that was on Lifetime Channel. Some of you may have seen that. And she recognized my abilities as well, because when I studied with her, I had already been serving as a medium for some time, publicly. So that leads me to, then after studying with those mediums at the Learning Light in Anaheim, California, I opened up my own development circle. And that's when my spirit guide, White Feather, really stepped forward and was instructing me. So I got a lot of instruction from my spirit guide, White Feather. And I'm very grateful to this day for that, because he helped me to understand a lot of things. Like mediumship does not involve thinking. It's a matter of surrendering to spirit. And so I did my first quote reading, and I don't call them readings anymore because I'm not reading anything. I'm not reading your aura. I call them sessions because I'm having a chat session. I'm literally having a conversation with them. And so just like when you're with people here, there has to be a willingness on the other person, the spirit person's part, to communicate with you, just like here in the physical. Otherwise, you don't have the communication. So there's an experience in practicing making that contact, and also building a rapport. It's just like we don't divulge our personal information with people that we don't trust. So they are people, and we have to learn, we have to build their trust. We have to gain their trust. And it's through love that I do so. It's through explaining to them that I'm here to help you. I want to help you. And I'll do my best to do so. And I just ask that you do your best to do so. So in 2003 is when I did my first, at that time I did call them readings, my reading. And so it's been over 17 years that I've served as a medium in this, and I have enjoyed every moment of it. There have been some challenging times as well with any life experience, but it's just a joy and honor, and I'm passionate about serving to the best of my ability to help people connect with their loved ones and pets on the other side. So that gives you a little bit. So I started expressing it, meaning that I started stepping out. In 2005, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. And that's when I stepped out and did my first public demonstration. And that was a spirit circle, actually, where it's a smaller group. But that's where the medium opens up to who's there, the spirits, and gives messages with the people that are in a circle or in a small group. And then I did larger groups, which I call demonstrations, or I call them hellos from the other side. And some of you may have experienced that with me. And so I also do not say that I'm doing anything. It happens through me. I just make myself available. I humbly serve. I know that it's not just about me. And I have a wonderful, magnificent, loving, supportive spirit team that works with me, which is composed of great mediums that have served in a great capacity, and also my spirit guides and spirit helpers. And also I call upon the ascended masters, Jesus, Buddha, Kuan Yin, Paramahansa Yogananda, to just name a few, and some of the saints as well, Saint Francis and Saint Mother Teresa. And again, whether they're available or not at that time, because when we're in the spirit world, and Vondie can share more about this with her work, because it does fit in together, we're not just floating on a cloud when we go back to home. That's our home, the spirit world. We have activities, we go to classes, we meet with counselors, and she can share more about that. But anyway, so I started calling them mediumship sessions, because with a psychic reading, they're readings, because we're reading the aura. And it's easy to get information from someone's aura. That's another reason that my mediumship teachers, especially the English ones that I study with, that they're adamant about not getting in the aura of the person. So not leaving the platform. When I do a group demonstration, you will not see me going out into the audience. I did that before I knew better, and I could tell I was still linking with spirit. But there's times when if the medium does that, you get in the aura and you start getting information psychically. Okay, and there's a big difference between psychic reading and mediumship. And so I'd like to just briefly talk about that. So with a psychic reading, we're reading information from third dimension. That's the person's aura. Okay, and it's a matter of just the psychic getting that information. Okay, but with mediumship, there has to be cooperation from a disincarnate person, spirit. Okay, someone who has passed over, and then they draw close, and that leads me into how they communicate with me. And they communicate with me in the same way that you sense your environment with your physical senses. So they show me things. There are images that are that enter my brain, and my optic nerve. They can affect my optic nerve to change things into different shapes as well, to bring through evidence as well. So when I am demonstrating, when I'm doing a session or for someone, my eyes are open, and I'm looking, I'm staring off. I'm in somewhat of a daydream state. Okay, so it's a much slower brainwave state called theta. All right, and I teach people how to get into this very quickly, and Vondie can vouch for that. There's an effective way to practice this and to move into that state. So I'm one of those mediums who teaches and has my truth, like some others that I know, that we all have these abilities. But what differs is the level of awareness of our abilities. Okay, and so when we come in to study in development circle or take a course or whatever, and that it heightens our awareness of our own abilities. So they're able to show me images. What happens is they're not possessing me, but they're able to affect my consciousness with their energy, and they're able to project images into my mind. So their images become my images. Okay, and so that's one way, is they're able to project images into my mind. All right, and that's clairvoyance. They also give me a lot of information clairaudiently, and that is clear hearing. That's like if you were listening to a song. How many of you have had a song playing over and over in your head where it drives you nuts? Okay, well, that's how the spirit people can be if I'm not speaking a piece of information, a name or something that they're wanting to get across to their loved one. Because believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it's their time. They know what they want to say. So I don't interview them like I did early on so much anymore. I allow them to present evidence that they know their loved one will know that it's them, will identify them. So I operate in what's called an evidential medium, where I receive very specific evidence of their continued existence. And then I also receive their healing messages. Why have they come? They let you know, this is why I've come. They also like to let you know that I'm around and I see what's happening. I still participate in your life. There's some of you that might remember or might have seen the movie Ghost. And when Patrick Swayze's character Sam, when he was killed, and then he discovered that Oda Mae Brown, Whoopi Goldberg, was the medium that somebody knew that he was alive because she could pick up his thoughts. That's clairaudient. So he would say something and she picked it up like she was hearing it. That's called clairaudience. And so I get a lot of information that way. And they work hand in hand though. So if spirit shows me, and remember I call spirit, meaning the spirit people, your loved ones, or pets. Pets communicate the same exact way as people. It's just that my body now are paws. My hands are paws. And so they refer to parts of my body like it would be like a dog, but I also have communicated with birds, rat, hamster, you name it. Anything that has consciousness. We all have consciousness, so we're able to, if they're willing to do so, to communicate in that capacity. So the clairaudience, I get a lot of information, and is hearing via thought. So another way that they communicate with me that's very effective, and they've been doing a lot more of this recently, and this is in more of a physical way, and that is clairsentience. And what they're able to do is they do not possess me, but they do overshadow, step into my aura, my energy field so strongly and so closely that they are able to affect, and I give them permission ahead of time. It's not like I just do this and I'm open 24/7. And that's why I'm just jumping around a little bit, because I'm listening to my guides. They're like, well, you need to explain to them that you're not open 24/7. Because, so I get in this state. I say prayers ahead of time. I talk with them ahead of time. And I say, do your best. There's people there that can help you know how to communicate in this capacity. So with the clairsentience, what happens is I am able to relax my body and surrender my body and my mind to the point where they are able to move me somewhat like a puppet. So this has been happening a lot fairly recently, and I really like it because there's no denying it. Because even when it comes through with the medium, and the medium that's been working as long as I have and even longer than I have, sometimes doubts come in. And I've even had a spirit say, well, are you gonna say it? And then I finally say it, and the person's like, oh my God, that's my dad, da 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 da. So they're not my messages. I'm just the mail carrier. Just think of that. I don't read the mail carrier doesn't read your mail. So I just deliver it. So, but with clairsentience, so your loved one, if they choose to do so, can affect my nervous system through consciousness and affect my brain, so they can stimulate my nervous system so that I can feel what they experienced. And I'll give you an example of this. I did a spirit circle some time ago over in Santa Monica, California, a private session or private spirit circle. And there was, I believe, like 8 people or whatever. And so I was giving messages to different people. And in those small spirit circles at that time, everybody was guaranteed that they would receive a message. And this man came through for this woman, and he was giving me a strong feeling like I couldn't breathe. Okay, and this was many years ago. So many years have passed since then. So my guides know to kind of get them to tone it down some too, because what happened was it got to the point where I wasn't able to speak. And so the person that put this together is looking over at me like, hello, there's more people to get to. And so I just said, I just couldn't talk. And so it took about, I want to say it was a long 5-10 minutes. And I just was working with my guides and just to get the energy, because what happened is the energy was so strongly impressed upon me and affected me so much so that the physical, it took a while for it to leave my physical body. And so the lady afterwards, because sometimes the spirits, they're very private and they do not want to talk about every single thing that happened to them, personal things, but they will, sometimes the person will come up to me afterwards and she said, I know why you couldn't speak. She said, and why you were choking, you couldn't breathe, because he hung himself. And so the reason I share this is not to be morbid, but to let you know that how much they can influence a medium clairsentient. Sometimes they'll move me in a position or in a certain way, and they have even been able to change the muscles. I can feel it, and don't freak out, because all of this happens by and through the love and grace of God, of spirit, whatever you call that. So I want to get that clear. I'm not being possessed. I surrender so completely that they're able to use my body, my physical, in a physical way more. So there's some, especially men, that are not the most talkative people. And sometimes they'll be the first one in a demonstration that will come through, and it's like pulling teeth to get them to talk. And it's but that's also, I realized that to present that as evidence, and because their loved one or the recipient will say, well, yeah, well, he wasn't that talkative. They'll say, well, okay, that makes sense. So, but they can affect the way I walk in a public demonstration. They can affect me in a number of ways very strongly with clairsentience. And sometimes they can also give us fragrances. I have a woman that's here.
Oh, go ahead, Beecham.
You know, and she made her presence known to me earlier in the day, and she told me fiddlesticks. So she used to say, "Oh, fiddlesticks," because I've heard that term, but I don't use that term. And she also, there's something about fiddle faddle. So there's a woman that was giving me this, and she was giving me a feeling like she's grandmother, like she made it up into her senior years. And so I don't know if anyone can take that information.
So remember, we practiced earlier, if you think that applies to you, you can raise your blue hand in the participant box.
Also, I'm hearing the name Mary. And if Mary's not her name, then Mary is connected as somebody that could either be here living, that she's sending her love to, or it could be someone that's there in the spirit world with her. Let me see if she's got anything else here. She's given me in my body now, and she's telling me that she had arthritis. She had she's giving me the feeling in my knees, and she's telling me that she had the type where it was painful, where her joints were afflicted in that way as well.
Everybody, I'd just like to say thank you, Beecham, for coming to share with us today.
Yeah.
I know we didn't get to talk too much about the Life Between Lives and how it fits with mediumship, so I just wanted to say very briefly, which is just what Beecham alluded to, that I've been at his workshops and I've been at his platform events where he does mediumship for a large group, and people will ask, you know, what do the souls do on the other side? And that's the question that the Life Between Lives answers. You get to explore your time on the other side. Basically, I like to say it's what happens in heaven. And why did you choose to be you? What are you here to learn? And you get guidance from your counsel and your guides. You meet your soul family, your soul mate. It's incredible. Once I did mine and read about it, I would just be on hook. So, but as Beecham said, some of us are in school. Yesterday, I had someone who was in another universe, talking to beings in another universe about messages they were trying to give to us on Earth. So it can get way, 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 way out there. But it was beautiful and spiritual, very beautiful and spiritual.
But Vondie, you also just offer past life regression sessions too,
Yes,
right?
yes. Well, because the way it works is you do a past life session, the Newton protocol, if you will, is you do a past life session, just to kind of warm you up, and you cross over into the Life Between Lives and meet your spirit guide. That's session 1. And then the subsequent session is you do a shorter past life session. You cross over after your final day. And then the bulk of the session is on the other side, what happens in heaven. So it's a 2-session process. And the Newton Institute has now, just now with the COVID, allowed us to offer Life Between Lives remotely. Up until now, we were only allowed to do them in person. So I can now do the past life sessions and the Life Between Life sessions remotely. And I've been doing them, and spirit, as you know, Beecham, isn't bound by whether we're present.
Oh, exactly.
It works just as well.